But for now, we toss it to my colleague Katlego, Nyoni, who's standing by.
Thank you very much, Patricia. This morning we are at the University of Limpopo, where of course students, particularly the Student Representative Council at the University of Limpopo in Mankweng, have also been closely monitoring the developments around the National Convention at UNISA in Pretoria. Of course, the university has had its fair share of student-led protests, ranging from issues such as high tuition fees, as well as issues of accommodation around NSFAS, as well as crime around the area of Mankweng. We are bringing in this morning the former SRC president at the University of Limpopo, who's also been closely monitoring deliberations at UNISA in Pretoria on that first day of the National Convention. That is Kuto Mama Bolo, to talk to us and give us the student perspective at the University of Limpopo. Kuto, thank you very much for your time on the SABC News Channel. First of all, do you welcome the idea of a national dialogue?
Well, thank you very much for having us. Firstly, we do not welcome the idea of having a national dialogue because we've always made it clear that the people's voice was said last year on the 29th of May in the elections. So that is the true representation of what the people on the ground are saying. Political parties have went to the ground, they've spoken about their manifestos, and people voted based on that. We know the issues we are faced with in the country. There's really no need for us at this particular stage, where our resources are extremely scarce, to be spending 700 million on a national dialogue. We've seen from the first day, I was highly disappointed to see a hall filled by old people, young people who are going to be determining the future of this country, were not as represented as one would like to be. So the situation was not really one that we would have expected. We expected to see more young people in the room, because in any event, whether we agree or not, it is going ahead. But at least one thing that we expected is to see young people in the room. But we didn't see that, so we're not happy with the first day. Possibly as we proceed, we're going to see more young people being incorporated into this particular dialogue. But over and above, I believe that we know the issues we are faced with. We just need implementation to show that everything is addressed.
The president yesterday mentioned that the cost will not necessarily be that amount that was initially determined, ranging to 700 million. He said that it would be less. What's your take regarding that?
Regardless, I don't believe in that. Even if it is less, it's something that was not budgeted for. I mean, the votes were budgeted for there in Parliament. We voted not knowing any item that speaks on the national dialogue. That's why the chairperson of that particular committee, Dr. Musi Merman, was asking the question to say, where will the money come from? At this stage, we cannot afford to be taking from essential items that we're supposed to be spending on and diverting money into something that we already know. I mean, everyone knows that South Africa is a country riddled with crime. GBV is high. Unemployment. Recently, unemployment is skyrocketing again. So we know the challenges we are faced with. Why must we have another kind of a conversation when we already know what we are faced with in the country? Like I said, the most important thing that we need to do is to ensure that we go back to the drawing boards, have an implementation strategy of all the policies that we have in the country to ultimately ensure that everything is addressed.
And finally, what issues pertaining to higher education, what pressing matters pertaining to higher education, especially looking at the current climate, would you prefer be ventilated as well as deliberated upon at the convention, of course paving a roadmap for the national dialogue?
Well, one wouldn't speak about higher education without mentioning NSFAS, because NSFAS obviously it funds many students in the higher education sector, and we know that NSFAS has been crippled by corruption. NSFAS has been crippled by people who are not really that effective. But we welcome the new board. We welcome the pronouncement made by the higher education minister to ensure that ultimately NSFAS gets back to his feet. And we also welcome his pronouncement that they want to have a new funding model to ensure that everyone is catered for. So we're going to be closely looking at those particular developments to ultimately ensure that NSFAS is back on its feet. Another thing that we've noticed in higher education in particular is the issue that relates to GBV. There are high cases of GBV in the higher education sector, and I feel like that is not really looked into that much. Recently, a student was killed in the Northwestern University. Even here at the University of Limpopo, we recently had a case of an attempted rape, and that is something that we are busy dealing with. But we have seen that not many institutions have gender desk, so we would like to have gender desk across many institutions to ensure that everything is ultimately addressed.
Thank you very much, Ayanda. That's the former SRC president at the University of Limpopo, Kuto Mamabolo, ventilating a number of issues ranging from GBV to NSFAS, saying that they welcome the new board of the scheme, as well as mentioning that the issues around student funding are quite important, that they don't necessarily welcome the national dialogue, the idea of the national dialogue. However, they are interested to find out what will be deliberated upon pertaining to issues affecting students. We know that the discussions there on the modalities of the national dialogue were finalized at the National Convention there yesterday. Ayanda, it's back to you in the studio.
Katlego Nyoni is reporting live to us from the University of Limpopo in that province as we continue crisscrossing South Africa to get you the sentiments of ordinary South Africans who in some ways are meant to be represented at this particular gathering. It's day 2 of the National Convention, which is of course meant to give a framework, if you like, for the national dialogue which will take place at a time yet to be agreed to.